Okay, so while I'm in my living room, you may hear a lot of, you may hear occasional background noise between my daughter running up and down, my ex doing her yoga studio as I'm right next door now. But bear with me. Tonight may actually probably won't be a long night because I'm only going to really talk about this one topic. In the email that I sent everybody, apologies that if I haven't gotten to your presentations and the outlines, because the last 2 weeks have been a really mad dash. And usually that's not what, when you sell a property and stuff, it usually is not quite like that, but this was a different scenario. So once I'm actually settled Friday, that over the weekend, I'm going to be doing a lot of work and a lot of catch up and stuff and something like that. So I will actually be getting to everyone's presentation and outlines that have uploaded their materials, as well as other materials, such as the process books, the latest round. And I'm going to be sending in, sending back and forth sort of commentary with the outlines and presentations. That's going to be in the form, comments in the form of the comments that are attached or written in the PDF form. As you see in the process books, it's the comment section that's turned on. And that's where you'll see some commentary. But that's what everyone should look out for over the weekend, because I do, emphatically plan to tackle all of that from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that way I am up to date, and so that everyone has an up to date sort of touch point on their materials, so that we can continue through the next process. And so because of that, definitely there's leeway I am putting into this, so that it's not like, if something goes on, it's not quite 100% to sort of on the mark and stuff, there's going to be a major curve. Well, let me not say major curve, but there's going to be a curve there in terms of keeping in mind of the schedule, how the schedule's been hectic on my end, because that's no fault of anybody here. It's all on me, and so I'm taking that has to be taken into accommodation. So with that, before we begin, I just want to open up the floor to see if anybody has any questions or commentary about anything that's that they've been working on. There's some confusions that they think maybe might be helpful to other folks having it explained or clarified. Sorry about that. Does anybody have anything? So from the crickets, I take it, no, everything, people are in a good space.
I think so.
Right. Yeah, same here.
Sorta. I think I would need to talk to you after class. So.
Okay. Excuse me. Also, my allergies are in full effect. So if I'm coughing or such like that, that's what that is. Hopefully I don't go into a sneezing fit, because I don't want to go through that. I've already been through 3 today. All right, so today is going to be a little different presentation. It's not going to be on Google Slides. It's in Keynote. So like I said, this is one of my traditional presentations that I give that's off the curriculum. And so I originally created it in Keynote, so it's just easier to keep it there. And so switch through. Share. It's Keynote. All right. So does everyone see frame here? It says, Keynote. Well, you'll just see sort of like the same sort of panel, but does everyone see this slide, the art and design of entrepreneurship?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So basically, just a recap of what week 9 was, where essentially Asked everyone to sort of read within the writing and research for graphic designers. That page to sort of help you sort of create that narrative structure for your final presentations. That everyone should at this point finalize the name of your project, which I will then ask everyone, not today, but I will be asking via email what everyone's sort of project name will be. And then there's, the homework was just to continue sort of refining a summary presentation, utilizing the tips that were within the pages to read. And then sort of like, really starting the foundation of building your defining your visual direction. That's built off of what you've done within your summary, making certain that, you've kind of thought out and clearly sort of like, what your intended message is, thinking of the possible design elements that will be used to help visualize that message, and a thought on the particular media channels that might be most effective to reach your audience. And I have seen people post to for week 9. So that was the recap for last week. So getting into this week, excuse me, it's a full page. Everyone should be seeing the full screen. I hope I have not lost anyone, because I've lost my cursor. Okay. Exit out. This first. Okay. So today I'm going to talk a lot about one of the fundamental things that as creatives, we tend not to think about. And that is, how do you actually survive and make a living as a creative? We're so busy learning how to stretch our creative muscles, learning various different techniques, how to improve our skill set, that a lot of times what happens is that the business aspects fall to the wayside. And that's not an intentional oversight, because design education really does concentrate more on the conceptual learning versus sort of melding the two of both conceptual, but also the practical. How do you actually take these creative skills and make a career out of it, where yourself, your skills, your work, your time are valued and valued properly. And so I'm going to sort of talk about how you would do that. And it's really not a major in-depth sort of overview of stuff. I'm really hitting a lot of highlights, certain factors that you should be aware of and should know of, and that you'll take these nuggets and sort of go on your own and actually explore to find out in deeper detail what all of it means and how it applies to each individual. Because depending on your creative track, certain things are different within different disciplines. Overall, I'm touching on universal aspects that will affect everyone in no matter what discipline you're in. And I will denote which disciplines this is more specifically to. Some things here I'm going to talk about is geared more towards graphic design and the different disciples within graphic design. But overall, it's universally applied across the creative field. So one of the fundamental things is generally, how you transition, and how do you transition from student to an in-house designer, or transition from in-house designer to a freelancer, or your own. Well, I will say this, when I talk about freelancers and studio owners, I'm going to actually kind of put them in the same meld, because if you're freelancing, you basically do run your own shop. You may not have a staff and you may not have space and stuff like that, but the principles will be the same. In freelancing, you may be doing it part-time, you may be doing it, as you've in between, as you try to build a steady client roster. And if you are established, then you have a design studio, a creative agency, where there's some more deeper implications in there, but the methodology will be the same. So what I would like folks to sort of see themselves as is the transitioning to in-house. I'm going to talk about how do you, and that I will talk a little bit about how you would get from a student into a full-time job, because I have a separate presentation about that that we'll be covering in about 2 weeks. But in this, it's really going to be talking about how do you sort of set yourself up to be a freelancer. So if you're going to do any sort of work, how to protect yourself no matter what position you're in. And the rules actually still would be helpful too, even if you're working in-house, if you're working at a company. So if you're working at a company, an organization, agency, anything, you're referred to as in-house design. So a lot of people tend to think, well, I have a full-time job, my job's there to protect me. No, they're not. There's certain things that they will look out for only because it's in their best interest. But essentially, you have to keep in mind, a company's looking out for themselves. They're not necessarily looking out for you 100%. Now, there are some great companies that work out there that they are, take their workers and employees very seriously in their well-being, and making certain that they're compensated in terms of both money and benefits and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the only person who's really going to advocate for you is yourself. And so that's where I'm approaching this from. You advocating and knowing how to protect yourself, no matter if you're at a great company and they're looking out for you. It cannot hurt for you to also know how to look out for yourself. Now, so when you actually now are working inside, being an in-house designer is going to afford you some cover if you're planning to, venture out on your own. And in the context of some of this, figure that, I'm looking at a person being in-house for a few years, say anywhere from 3 to 5 years. And, they may be interested in really ramping up their freelance work so that they can actually plan on maybe transitioning from a full-time employee to a full-time freelancer to eventually running their own studio. I'm going to have to put on pause for a second. So stop share for a second, and I will be right back. I just have to do something. Sorry about that. Had to grab my daughter's takeout. Okay, so back here. Okay, so so I was saying, so if you're working in-house and you have any aspirations to sort of try to start sort of freelancing and building your own clientele, it's really good to do that while you're working for someone else, because it's actually going to afford you a few different things that you would not be able to do if you just went straight into it. The first thing is money. If you're working for someone, you can now you don't have to worry about covering your expenses, your rent and stuff like that, because you have a full-time salary that's coming in that you can now actually use some of that to start saving, to scroll away for when you want to actually start freelancing in a bigger share than your full-time job. Now, generally the rule of thumb is you want to build a year's worth of cash reserves that's going to cover you both professionally and personally. So once you make the decision to sort of freelance full time, you essentially cut off a steady stream of income, and so it's going to be a sort of a culture shock, and you will sort of run into a lot of expenses that you may not necessarily have thought of. And if you don't have reserves for it, you're going to really run into a wall quick, fast. Because with that, personal and professional expenses, the personal naturally would be your day-to-day living expenses. But professional expenses would be hardware. If you need to get your own setup at home, software, printer. If you have to arrange to have meetings at spaces after hours or days off, because if folks who are actually trying to start freelancing, and they're trying to build up clientele base, people earn vacation and sick days all the time, and so when people are out, don't think that it's always that because they are truly sick or they're on vacation. They can use their time any way they want. And there may be a time where you go out for a client meeting, and you call in, oh, I can't come in today because I don't feel so well. I'll be in tomorrow, and it's not like a hidden fact. It's a well-known fact that people do that, it's just a matter of being strategic and respectful to your current job, that you don't put them in any sort of unfavorable light, or put them in a situation where they have to take action against you. So while you're actually working for someone, it's best in there because you can actually get to learn all the different aspects of a business. Now, you're going to learn more than just what you do naturally as a creative, but you're going to get friendly with other departments that you need to know to freelance, to be successful, and understand the basics of how they operate, such as accounting. You have to know how to, keep track of those invoices, what your expenses are going, how much you're spending out, versus how much is coming in, what needs to happen, track down late bills, play tax collector, understanding how to, put away taxes so that the IRS doesn't come after you. And many other different things, such as mailing materials out to clients and so on like that. So the various different departments within a company that one should get to know is accounting, the mailroom, production, administration, and sales. Definitely sales, because at the end of the day, if you're going to do any sort of freelancing, you have to sell yourself. There's no one else that's going to do it for you. So you have to sort of start learning what that is, what goes into it, and actually how to be an effective salesperson, because that is a completely different type of art form and a different sort of mentality than if you're sort of trying to sell a concept. You know, sales is more about the business aspect of getting folks intrigued into knowing and feeling that you're the right person for their projects. You know, administration, it falls into all the day-to-day paperwork stuff that we all take for granted if we're working in for another company, you know, because they have departments and other people that deal with that. So that's where you come in, where it's scheduling appointments, scheduling presentations, making certain that you have all the materials you need to do the mundane stuff, is envelopes, you know, office supplies, such like that. Production is self-explanatory in terms of, excuse me, how these projects get done, from printers to, you know, setting up the foundation, the print files, which is, in the old ways, we call them mechanicals. You know, it's all the digital boards that we work on in InDesign. Those, the technical terms are those mechanicals, you know. But setting those up, making certain that they print right, that the materials are in there, that images are set to the specifications they need to be if they're going to be digital or print, you know. And as I mentioned before, the mailroom, because as designers, we need to know how the US Post Office works and how couriers work in terms of shipping end products, how we send materials that from the printer in terms of weight, cost, ways to sort of cut through the red tape on some of those things, understanding how far we can actually push to creative limits on certain things, because the United States Post Office, some of the machines will not take certain finishes and techniques, such as gloss. Gloss is very, if you have a gloss finish on a printed piece, that's going to have a big problem going through the UPS roller machines because of the ink smearing or not adhering to the stock whatsoever. Now, so there's a various different things that you have to understand in terms of the production that will work best, that go through the mail, so that there's no holdup. You know, it's also essentially, as you're working for someone else, you have the luxury to be able to take the time to research specific markets that you're interested in. You know, say you have a daytime job and you're working for not-for-profit agencies, you know, and while you like them, you really want to kind of get more over into the corporate commercial side. So now you have the opportunity and the cover to actually sort of utilize some of your company's materials and resources to understand and see what these other markets are. Again, strategically and smartly, so you don't get caught or put anyone in a awkward situation. You know, and just to see if you really are that interested in outside markets, and then to see what kind of work people are actually doing in those markets, to see if that's work that interests you, or if you feel you can actually tackle that kind of work. Also, working for someone else provides you cover in terms of that you can utilize the resources, if the company provides it, for personal development. And a lot of companies do offer these personal development perks to help you improve in your job. Or if you can somehow, if you have an ancillary sort of interest in something, say you're a print designer, but you have interest in UX, UI skill sets, you can sort of set up a pitch to your supervisor saying that, you know, learning that will make you multifaceted, so you can actually tackle print projects and then convert them into digital form, you know. And companies will pay their employees training to do that. And you can actually use that while you're at your company, but it's also helping you in the longer scheme of things. And a lot of people don't take advantage of their company's their personal development perks. Companies do offer that, especially if, say, the salaries are not as high. They will offer these other perks to sort of make up for it on the economic level. So for them, paying for it would be the same as if they just put that in your check. So it's a trade-off, but companies do throw that out there to entice people they want to join their team. And it is a benefit that more folks need to take advantage of, because yes, you're learning it under their dime and you want to implement it for them. But at the end too, you're taking that, you have that skill set now that you can apply elsewhere now, and you got it all for free, but that is a very unsung perk that folks don't really take advantage of. The other thing, working as an in-house designer and working for another company is beneficial, is that it helps you actually start to build a client list, so that way you can actually, see who's out there, talk to them, engage with them without sort of worrying about, okay, well, if I work for them and they don't pay me, I can't make my rent this month. Well, you have a full-time job, so your rent's covered on that. So you can actually now engage with potential clients and see, which clientele works best, and being able to actually, start building a base that you can now reach out to eventually transition to, steady part-time work or steady full-time work. It takes the stress away of trying to land that client, because again, a lot of your essentials are covered because of your full-time job, and everybody may experience this at some point in their career, but when you're actually trying to land a client and you don't have any financial cover, it is an extremely stressful time that is quite unnerving now. And so that's why I advise, if you're going to start freelancing, to start building that up while you're working for somebody else, and really start building, a solid clientele base, at least a year or two before you want to actually start on your own. It'll make you sleep a lot easier at night. The next thing too, while you're working for someone else, is you can actually create a marketing strategy for your freelancing, both in the short-term and long-term goals, because you can also sort of shadow marketing departments, or how strategies are done at your full-time job. And so you can kind of parallel use the skill set that's there to actually help yourself set up a position for something beyond where you're working at right now. Also, while you're in there, you can also now develop your own brand identity, with a few leave behinds. It's always essential to have some sort of leave behinds. Business cards are still very much in effect, and a small promotional material, whether that may be a postcard or a sort of a simple fold-out poster, or something really simple, easy, that doesn't cost you a whole lot to produce, but you can create in order and on demand as you need it. That could be a good promotional tool, but for cents on the dollar. Excuse me. The other thing too, I insist on everyone doing while you're in school, definitely when you're out of school, I insist this to clients when I meet with them. And it still blows my mind in 2021 that a lot of folks do not do this and go out and buy an actual domain name and secure a web hosting company, so that they can actually have both business email with their domain name, as well as then to be able to host a website. To me, it's just a fundamental fact of doing business. Anytime I get an email from something that's like at Gmail or at AOL or at whatever it is .com, that sounds like a free hosting site, I'm skeptical of them. They're not presenting themselves in a very professional manner, and I have to question that. Because getting a domain for 2 years is dirt cheap. It's like $10. So you can get your own domain name for 2 years for $10, and then going to a web hosting company, that costs a little bit more, but their base package, you can get away with anywhere from $10 to $20 a month. now, and you can have access up to 500 business emails. And so it's much better to have a email that reflects your business than sort of what comes off as a personal email. Also, too, those personal services, Gmail, AOL, whatever, they get flagged by companies' spam filters because they're recognized as non-business emails. And so if you're doing sort of a promotional campaign via email blast, your stuff may never get anywhere because it'll fall into the company's filter. And so getting an actual domain doesn't guarantee you're going to get through 100%, but it definitely helps even the odds. The next thing is, and again, something that many folks overlook, develop a simple structured website. It's too easy to build websites today. Yeah, you don't even have to build it yourself from scratch anymore, where we used to have to use Dreamweaver, what was that, BB Edit, to actually do all this coding to build stuff up. There's many sites now that offer easy web building, that you're really doing it what we call WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. So you're building it as you would design in InDesign now, and their platform does the code behind the scenes. So you have Adobe Portfolio, you have Square, you have Wix, Weebly, and those are more on the, everyone sees those as the freebie sites, but they have a tier that you actually pay where you get more professional access. And then you have others that's requires a little bit more understanding of coding, Weibo, WeCode. These are various different structures and levels as to how deep you can build a site. But a simple structured website, even utilizing some of these templates that they have, some of the templates are actually nicely done. WordPress is another one. There's no excuse not to take advantage of it to present a more professional face. And the other thing while you're using the cover of your full-time job is creating a social media plan. But really understanding the platforms that work best for you and your intended markets. Now, I do realize social media and the use of digital platforms will vary depending on generations, because I'm part of Gen X, so I understand social and digital, I embrace it, but I'm not as vested into it as an everyday kind of thing than say Generation Z. And Generation Z would be millennials, and those would be folks from about 35 and younger, possibly 40 and younger, where digital is just, everyone's been born with digital. So it's like, how could you not know what was happening before that, So it's an easy sort of thing to get into and just to think about. So, but with it, there's a caveat, because there is so much social media out there, you can also overload yourself. So you want to actually limit that social media plan to about no more than 3 feeds, because it's going to be, it's like a job. It's a job in its own to really push your social media platform so that it's engaged, that the people engaging with it are fully immersed in it, that they feel that it's active, that it's not just sitting there, that it's static. So it becomes a lot of work. So my suggestion is to limit it to just 3 feeds so it doesn't overburden you. But also too, your client base is probably not looking at more than just 3 feeds. They're probably really looking at 1 or 2, and that's it. So the next thing about that is, as you're working in-house, it's like, if you're going to freelance, you have to think about, okay, where are you actually going to do this? Now, if you're working for already somewhere, we all start off working from our homes, but if you're actually looking to transition from your home, or for whatever reason, you can't work from home, you have to start thinking about what are the other options that are available to me that I can actually do my creative work in a different environment. You know, so you have to kind of understand and know where you will work as your own boss, because it's going to be as important as it is building a strategy to land your clients. You know, so it goes hand in hand. You know, excuse me. So in that, we all start from our homes, wherever we live, you know, depending on situation, because it's, for whatever reason and whatever the situation is, it's already rent-free. You know, it's already being utilized. So that's always going to be the base start, you know, but that's going to depend on everyone's individual circumstances. You know, like for example, if I was doing freelance work right now, I would actually have to put a halt to that because my home situation wouldn't be conducive for it. You know, and there's times where the folks, you know, if there's a roommate situation, or if wherever you're living at, there may be prohibitions against sort of utilizing a business at that particular address. You know, but generally that's where we first start, and then you start leveling up. Now, the next with that would be now to look at rented spaces. And so that could be at shared working offices where you rent a desk, you know, as you need it. You know, in the beginning, it used to be just you have to rent a space for a month on a monthly basis. And now it's morphed into you rent as you need it. So you buy as you go. You know, so you can rent a desk for an hour, 2 hours, whole day, you know, or you can rent a cube for an hour, whole day, same thing. Or you can actually have what's called a turnkey office, where it's an actual solid office that you rent, you know, and that it's your space. Those are more expensive. Those are the most expensive. So if you're going to rent space, you're going to have to research where your base location is going to be to understand the rent costs. So if you want to rent in prime location, where you're going to pay premium dollar, you know, depending on where you actually are located, the cost of living, you also have to take in consideration on that, because the rent cost could be as much as, say, how much you're paying for an apartment or a home. You know, so then that's where maybe it's, you know, you rent the space as you need it, you know, and it's a desk or two. You know, maybe it's renting in an off the road location. You know, back when I had my spaces in 2007 through 2012, in the beginning, you know, I was living in Long Island. I was looking at spaces. Spaces were much cheaper in Brooklyn because clients didn't want to travel to Brooklyn, you know, and Brooklyn was not really known as, oh, a spot to go to for creative. Yeah, everyone still wanted to be in Manhattan. And then that shifted like overnight in, I guess, 2008, 2009, definitely after 2010. Brooklyn was the joint. Everybody wanted to come into Brooklyn now, and Brooklyn's rent shot through the roof. I actually landed space in Manhattan. I actually found a place that was actually pretty cool and workable. So you just have to really understand where your base location is, and understanding what the going rates are and what you can actually get away with, and set sort of some guidelines for yourself, you know, and the availability of space. Sometimes there's space available because the market is a little soft. You know, understanding how what's happening like right now with COVID, rental space is flat. You know, folks are not, because you can't go into the offices. So those who actually have these sort of shared working offices have taken a big hit. They're hurting, you know, because no one's going to be in their offices, whether it be by choice or whether it be by mandate from the locality. Then the next thing is, you know, sometimes when you freelance, you have a friend, you know, you've you both been doing great, you know, you've been in school, and you know, you click, you think, oh, let's start working together. Yeah, that'd be cool, it'd be fun, let's have it. That's where the problems come into play, because you know, when you're going to work with a partner, you cannot look at it as a friendship. You have to look at it strictly as a business situation. You have to understand your limits and your irritations and your pressure points as to working with someone else. No matter how whether you like the person or not. Well, if you don't like the person, you definitely have to structure that. But particularly if it's a friend, many times people get messed up and work with friends, or do work for friends, like have their friends or family hire them, which I'll touch upon a little bit later on. But if you're going to go work with a partner, you have to actually develop some guidelines as to the philosophy, both of you and your partner's philosophy on business, what you feel on office etiquette, behaviors that are acceptable, as well as what you both think about the business, how the business should go and where it should go. If you do not discuss that beforehand, you set yourself up for major heartaches and clashes. Honestly, my philosophy is I do not do business with friends. I will not get into a business with a friend unless they think pretty much identically like me. And in all my 30 years of working, I've come across one person that I ever entertained the idea of working with, because we both had the same mindset about business. The only problem is we both wanted to do creative. We didn't like the business side. So it was like, well, we can't go into business together because who's going to do the business side? You can always hire someone to do that. But again, like I said, you want to be really sort of in sync as to like what the plan is. So with that, those are just some basics in terms of, working inside and utilizing your full-time job to help build your creative dream. But there is things that we don't know that I'm going to shed a little light on, and that's the nitty-gritty of business within New York City and New York State. And I say it in the two sections such as that because New York State and New York City have very different guidelines as to how they do business. They are considered two separate entities, even though they're within the same state. Because New York City generates the most income for the state of New York than any other sections combined. So New York City has its own you consider it that New York City is its own separate state within the state. And with that, you pay a whole separate set of taxes in there now. And so when you're actually trying to work for yourself, freelance, trying to operate a full-time business, no matter what, the New York State, New York City, and the IRS are very separate beings that they all have one goal in mind, and that's to take as much of your money as they possibly can. And how do they do that? Through taxes and through regulations. And I learned that the hard way, having my studio in New York City for 5 years. New York State and New York City are not friendly to small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses, definitely not freelancers or self-employed. And that's been a big bone of contention. But in the last year, de Blasio and the city council did pass a freelancers bill. The Freelancers Union is a professional organization that looks out and caters information to freelancers so that you are protected. If you're going to freelance, definitely check out Freelancers Union. They have some very excellent information in there. It's free to join if I remember correctly, because I am a member. I don't pay any membership or anything like that. But they have some very good information in there. But they've been lobbying New York City and New York State, particularly New York City, to create a bill that protects freelancers and the self-employed, because freelancers and self-employed have been burned by companies not paying their contracts or their invoices. So it's the cost. I guess it's the cost of doing business in a big city, but you know, because New York City and New York State is one of the big markets. And so they definitely want their cut. But you have to understand that there is separations of city, state, and federal taxes. So if you work in New York City, you pay a New York City tax. Then you have to pay the New York State tax. Then you have to pay federal tax. You know, so you're paying both city, you're paying state, and you're paying federal taxes out your paycheck. If you live outside of New York City, you do not have to pay a New York City tax. So if you live in Westchester, you live in, you know, Long Island, you don't have to pay that payroll tax, not the payroll tax. They also had a payroll tax, but they put that on hiatus, although they're talking about bringing that back. You did have to pay a New York City business tax. If you live in the 5 boroughs, you do have to pay it. Outside the 5 boroughs, you don't have to worry about it. It's a pain, and it's kind of unfair when you actually start looking at how much comes out your check. But you have to also clearly understand what types of insurance too you're going to need on your location. And this is where the regulations come into play with New York State and New York City. You will have to get workers' comp if you rent any kind of space. Even if you rent space, if you run a business out of your home, you have to have workers' comp, because if you engage in any sort of contract work with folks, like if you hire somebody, you have to have workers' comp to protect yourself and protect the worker. Because if they come in and there's no insurance and say they hurt themselves, well, they can sue you personally and take whatever you have. But if you have workers' comp, they get paid through that fund, that insurance fund. So it's not coming after you personally. You know, you also have to take certain business insurance for the equipment and the space. And these things add up. They're not cheap within New York City, New York State. Also, you're going to have to learn in terms of doing business from both local, state, and federal level, what agreements are, what proposals are, what are requests for proposals, which the acronym RFP is thrown. That's what if someone wants you to bid on a job, they're going to ask for an RFP. You know, how to submit and track down invoices and non-disclosures, NDAs. You have to know what all those are. And NDAs, everyone should, in this environment, should understand what an NDA is, because you hear it all the time with these celebrities and stuff like that, you know, oh, so-and-so signed this non-disclosure agreement, so they can't talk about Kanye West, they can't talk about Trump, they can't talk about, you know, this celebrity, that celebrity, or whatever. Now, and it's very important to understand an NDA if someone makes you sign it, because an NDA essentially is not protecting you, it protects the company, and companies vigorously enforce these NDAs. So definitely you want to understand what you're signing before, understand what you're going to sign. Also too, you want to understand the basics of copyrights and trademarks, at least have a fundamental understanding of what it is and how it's used. Intellectual property, because you're creating stuff. You're going to have to protect your own creation, you know, and understanding what derivative rights are. If you've created a piece that's based off of something else, there's a definitive line as to explaining what is actually your creation versus you copying someone else's work and then claiming it as yours. So understanding those basics, you have to really get a good, simple, clear understanding of what that is, to protect not only yourself, but, you know, to also protect clients, because sometimes clients will ask you for stuff that's clearly in violation of this, and you have to explain to them why you can't do that. And then lastly, you know, really finding good legal services that are catered towards creatives. And I will talk about a particular source for that. So anyone have any questions so far?
No, Professor.
Okay. Now, one of the fundamental things, you know, whenever anyone starts to work as a freelancer, I don't care if it's your first job I don't care if it's your 5th job, before you do anything where you're taking money in a transaction of business, other than as an employee, set up an LLC for yourself. They're dirt cheap to set up, and you can set them up, God, almost anywhere now. LegalZoom.com. There's plenty of services online where you can actually set up an LLC. Because usually in the States, they're based in Delaware. Now, Delaware is like the state for LLCs. As well as also if you're trying to kind of get some tax breaks, think about Delaware, put some businesses in Delaware, or some tax havens. You didn't hear that from me, but you know, it's a good tip to learn. You want to set up an LLC because what it's going to do is it's going to help you, and it's going to help protect your personal life from your professional life. And what I'm saying by that is the fact is, you know, if you're in a business action and for some reason it goes haywire, now, if you have done it through an LLC, they can only come after the LLC. They can't come after you personally. So your personal assets are completely safe. Say you own a home and you know you're working from home, and you can separate your business residence from your work residence. And so that way no one can come after your home if they want to sue you or something like that. You know, it's very important that an LLC gets established if you're going to do any kind of professional work. There's so much information online that you can find in various places, such as Biz Filings, LegalZoom.com. You know, those are some good, easy space places to go to set it up. I will say we're setting up stuff in New York City. It's a little bit more expensive. But in addition to setting up the LLC, it sets up a shell corporation. Well, let me not call it a shell corporation. It sets up the corporation, you know, as a limited liability corporation. So it doesn't protect you 100%, but it protects you from certain basic protections that most people come after you with. You know, and essentially is assuming you, making certain that your personal assets are safe. You know, the second thing you want to do with that LLC though, is you want to set up what's called an employee identification number with the IRS. It's really simple. You just go online, fill out a form, and that's it. You know, but you have to have an LLC first. You know, then you want to set up a basic business checking account with a local bank. And I probably would advise to do it with one of the bigger banks, where it's truly a bank and not necessarily a credit union or a really small bank per se. Because the bigger banks, I will say, I mean, yes, they have their charges and all this other stuff, but they're more accessible. You know, they're all over the place and they have a bigger client base. So they're used to business and you can get help quicker. And they have more safeguards to protect the account than say a smaller bank. And, you know, so, and in terms of also getting clearance from deposits, if you have a check and you deposit it within a bigger bank, I mean, generally you get access to that pretty quickly, like within the next day. If you're in a credit union or a smaller bank, you may not have access to your funds for up to 14 days. That's a hell of a long time, you know, so, but that's my opinion. I think banking at the bigger banks it's just more feasible and more logical for business. Personal accounts, that's completely a different thing. But a basic business checking account really won't cost that much. It has a lower limit as to what you need to set it up with. But if you have a partner, you have to do this with your partner. You can't do it separately because the partner has to be added to everything. Now, otherwise you are in breach of the business contract. Now, because as you set up the LLC, you have to list all the partners and anybody who's involved with the business other than yourself. Then the next thing is, if this applies, is submitting any necessary trademark applications for your branding to the US Copyright Office. I'm not going to say everyone does that. That is purely a personal preference. It's about $300–400 to register for a trademark application, and the U.S. Copyright Office is slow, so it's going to take some time, at least a couple of months, and they are a little picky. So if you're pretty much, develop a name or a look that, really is not going to be in such a huge consumer market, no, I probably would forego that. Trademark applications really go into a matter of like if you're really doing more like commerce and on a bigger scale and stuff like that. Keep in mind though, any trademarks or copyrights only apply to the United States. It does not apply to any business outside of the States. So jurisdiction ends at the continental, well, not continental, but the United States, 50 states. Canada does recognize America's copyrights and trademarks. I cannot say the same for the rest of the world. Europe does. I mean, you can pretty much say NATO allies will kind of respect the United States law, but outside of NATO, it's fair game. It's fair game. So, and I can speak from experience on that because someone in China took my name of my freelance, my LLC, and so I get a lot of calls and spam in Chinese, but there's nothing I can do about it now, because again, international, and my freelance is not that big, and I'm like, okay, whatever. So you can take it, you can run with it. It doesn't bother me. It's just all the spam calls that kind of get on my nerves. But the thing is, if you're a freelancer now, and freelancing, or even if you're trying to set up a studio, the one thing that you have to be is a Rottweiler with your paperwork. You cannot let that be lax on that paperwork. And that paperwork goes into agreements, invoices, NDAs, and so on like that, and taxes. There's a reason why, as creatives, we do agreements and contracts, and before doing anything, we put things in writing, having signed confirmation, so that way what's needed is outlined and clear, so that there's no back end coming in and say, well, hey, that's not what we talked about. You have to do this all over again. We're not paying you for this. It helps to protect yourself. These all need to be in place before you begin any sort of project. What the designer's rights are, what the client's rights are, what the terms of conditions for the project should all be explained and should all be agreed upon between designer and client. Confirming what the fees are and what rights you are actually turning over at the end of the assignment to the client. You as a creative, you retain all creative rights unless you unless you transfer that in writing to the client. Now, I will say through my experience, like if I'm creating brochures, posters, and stuff like that, I turn over the files. I don't really care about the rights in that, because what am I going to do with a poster that's about, say, a youth gospel party? I can't resell that to anybody. I'm not going to make any money outside of that other than the client. Now, if I've created say a sneaker design, well, yes, now that can be something that can be profitable, and royalties and licensing that I'm not necessarily turning over rights to. So essentially with any agreements and contracts, you need both designer and client to sign it before the project begins. It's good as a good way also to weed out the bad clients, because you will have clients that will hem and haw like, hey, why do I want to, what was I going to say? Why should I pay for this? Why should I do this? So and so. That's too much. I don't feel comfortable signing a contract before I start this job. Okay, that's good to know. I appreciate you coming to inquire about our services, but I don't think we're a good fit. I think you need to, be best if you find, try out XYZ firm. now, and send them on their merry way. Now, a good client is going to be knowledgeable, understands the value of signing a contract and an agreement. You know, it's always the bad clients that will hem and haw about deposits, contracts that give you the red flag right off the bat. Now, it's up to you as the creative to recognize that red flag and stay away from it. But I will say this, I guarantee everyone will go through at least one experience of it. It just can't be helped. You know, it's just par for the course for the nature of the business. And it's a good learning exercise, you know. But these contracts and agreements help to save headaches later on. And trust me, once you experience your first headache dealing with a client with all the BS, if you haven't really done a really good contract or basically protected yourself, oh my God, it is a nightmare trying to deal with that. You know? Now, NDA on your end or the client's end is essentially basically for the creative is just to keep certain information from legally spilling out that is proprietary. Now, and generally if a client is asking to fill that out, it may be because it's a brand new product that they want to keep secrecy on, that they're afraid of competitors coming in, or they're really just sort of overcautious because their lawyers want to do that. Certain markets and certain projects, you know, it wouldn't be unreasonable for that. Yeah, and it'd be a basic NDA just saying that the conversations you have and the, excuse me, the concepts that you present should just be kept strictly between you and the client. Yeah. It's really for very sensitive matters, and it's just an added layer of protection. Now, if it gets deeper than that, you have to assess, you know, the scope of it and in proportion to who the client is. Proposals. Now, proposals are a way for folks to solicit creative studios, freelancers to submit sort of their view, their takes on a particular project and how they may approach it, as well as sort of what their overall structure, fee structure is, and how they plan their work philosophy. So in a proposal, you're going to outline what you're planning to provide to the potential client and their project. So essentially you're going to outline, and these are basic, this is a basic setup. This is going to be in all proposals. So it's a simple proposal. Proposals can get lengthy and they can expand out to more details, but these are going to be the basic things that are going to be covered. You know, overall, outlining what the project is. You know, it's sort of an overview of what the overall project is, and you're just sort of repeating what they told you so that, you know, you're getting clarification that, yeah, this is what they said. You know, who the project's audience is. Now, they may tell you who the audience is because you're going to ask questions and so on like that, but you're going to do a little preliminary check to see who you think the audience is for that project. You know, it's not a deep dive. It's a real basic sort of, you know, examination just to see if what they're saying actually checks out. You know, then you're going to talk about essentially what the elements are planned for it, such as if there are deliverables to this project. Say it's a website, or is there going to be any sort of identity built with it? Is there going to be any social media platforms campaign with it? Is there any print materials for it? You know, you're not talking about what it looks like, how it is, anything. You're just talking about elements that may be needed as an overall plan. Now, then you're going to outline how long the project's going to take and the production schedule. So like, okay, we need things by this date. I'll turn over a concept by this date and so on like that, so that it keeps the project on track and everyone knows when things are supposed to be expected. So it also helps the client know when they need to get stuff to you, and if they don't, why things become late and how it pushes the schedule. Then it's also an explanation on what your credit fees are and the expenses that you are estimating you're going to incur through this. By all means, it's not a final tally. The final tally is at the end when you bill your invoice, but it's giving a sort of basic tentative structure as to what this could potentially be. You'll get more specifics as you agree and come up to an agreement, and that's where you sort of lock in some of the particulars now. And then you also put in what happens if those particulars change. Also in that proposal, you're going to provide some sample cases that are similar to the work that you're, being asked to bid on, to write this proposal for, because it helps the client to see, oh, have you done stuff before like this? Or if you've done stuff that's parallel, that we could see how it connects, and then with any contract, as with agreements in a contract, a proposal is also signed off by both designer and client, before any work begins, because with the signed proposal, then you can submit an invoice for your initial deposit. And I recommend everyone getting at least 50% of the total project cost upfront before you begin the job, and that's really important for all new clients. People will say, oh, I'll bill you at the back end. They do the work, client just bails. Well, I don't like it. Project's canceled. Thanks, see you later. And they try to walk away for free, because you did all this time and work, but now they don't want to pay. So you want to not take a job unless the client, agreed to an initial deposit of 50%, particularly if you've never worked with them. So you don't know how they pay. So at least with 50% deposit, if they sort of bail midway through the project, you have some expenses, you have some fees that will help you cover the work that you've done. Now, if this client becomes a repeat customer, that's when you can actually sort of change the deposits. And sometimes you may not even ask for a deposit. You just bill the project in thirds, but that's because only you have established a relationship and you've established a policy of how they pay. I can't stress enough how folks should never, ever begin any job without a deposit. And I'm going to say that's for friends or family. Some examples of proposals are these. I put up some links here. I'm actually going to go just check one. So I'm going to have to exit out first. And are these links live? Oh, I see. Here we go. I gotta wait for my little spinny. So I hope the background noise is not too much.
No, you're good.
Okay, so let me stop. I see somebody in the chat. It's in the chat. Okay. It's back. So that's back up. Share my screen. Oh, it talks about a proposal. Okay, here's the sample I was looking for. Right. So this is an example here that they're showing. It's a really simple one-page proposal, because a proposal could be a simple pager to a couple of pages. It really just depends on what's being what's being asked in the project, and it's also a preference to the designer as to how detailed they want to get into things. But you can see that it talks a little bit of, it sort of repeats what the client had told you about the project. Sort of, you may actually put in sort of a sales pitch as to why you're the best designer to do this. Then the fee structure, it's a basics, how you break down the fee structure is an individual choice. In my proposals, I break down the specifics a little bit more than just a line total. Then sort of this would go into sort of project timeline, but they name it milestones. And within your proposal, you can have your headers named whatever you want it to be named. So it's talking about certain key points that have to be met in terms of a schedule. What's to happen after the proposal, once it's accepted. the terms of conditions in accepting the proposal, talking about payment structure, and here they have 50% upfront, and then 50% after approval of the final work. Yeah, and then notations on how you'd like to get paid. Because of digital, because now, you know, folks can get paid digitally, whether it be PayPal, Square, Venmo, whatever, and stuff like that, or wired information. Because a lot of people are sort of turning away from checks now, because it does take a little bit longer to get your payment from a check versus sort of an electronic transfer. And then sort of breaking down just certain things that are, you know, the conditions and uses of rights and stuff like that. And then you have the signatures of both client and designer. So that's an example of a proposal. Back to Keynote. So actually, let me stop for a second. I thought I saw something.
So that's interesting, Professor. So that proposal you're creating after you already had a talk with the client, right? And
Yes,
you know
yes.
what you expected.
You have sort of like a, generally you always have a conversation beforehand, and it is, you know, you don't want to have a long, deep conversation, like 15 minutes to 30 minutes, an hour most, that's being generous, but you really want to keep it 15, 20 minutes, because unless they're going to pay you for the time to consult, you know, for a free consultation just to sort of submit a proposal, you want to cap that sort of discovery conversation to like 30 minutes, you know, that's it. Because you need certain information from them to write the proposal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what that is. So you definitely would have a conversation beforehand, unless they sort of have sort of like a overview of the project already written out in a brief, and they send you a brief. That usually happens with RFPs, requests for proposals. Companies will basically have an overview set up that answers all the questions they generally think will be asked. And if you need to ask some supplemental questions, they provide a contact that you can just reach out to. So those are the two ways you would get the information to create a proposal. You're not going to create a proposal blind. That's the one thing you can do now. So this is an example of a proposal from an actual studio. It's called Rogue. And it's a little old. It's 2008. Because I don't think everything on their whole thing has changed now, but you can see there is a cover sheet. This is more of a detailed proposal that, like, similar to my proposal. You have a cover sheet, excuse me. And that cover sheet could be just a cover sheet, and then you have a separate content sheet, or it could be the cover sheet that has the contents in there. It just basically outlines where stuff is within the proposal. Excuse me. So they can just jump to particular things, so and so. And then it shows some examples in here, such as the schedule. And this is a deeper schedule because a project will go through various phases. The first phase is strategy and research. Just as what we're doing for Design for Good, you know, that takes time to really understand what you're working on, how you're working on, you know, understanding what strategy they want to do, if they have one, or if you're building a strategy for them and stuff like that. So you're going to outline certain milestones in that phase as to when you're going to confer with the client. Then the second phase is now when after you've done your strategy and research and basically have confirmed with them what's what, you're going to start your creative exploration and design development now, and you're breaking down as to like what's expected there, materials you need from the client, you know, when you expect to turn around concepts from receiving that material, and down to the various different phases of revisions to new concepts to final. You know, phase 3 is when everything goes into production. You're doing all the finishing touches and everything. If things need to go to an outside vendor, excuse me, a third-party vendor, you're indicating when that needs to be where it needs to go. Yeah, and then the last phase is generally sort of like a debrief, depending on the project, sort of assessing how well the project is done, if there needs to have been some data collection that out of phase 3, that would be phase 4. You know, phase 4 can be different things depending on what the project is, but the 3 universal phases is strategy and research, creative exploration and design development, and production management, and you implement it. The other page I wanted to show is sort of how the fee structure is broken down. And this proposal is about a website design. And so you could see that in here, they are billing for the time of the consultation. Now you can have a policy of like for any new client or any client, that you bill for your consultations, that talking to you is not going to be free, unless they've already signed on to the project. There's no universal methodology on that. It is strictly a voluntary personal decision. Like, I won't charge anybody for a consultation. Now, as long as I do it, it's capped at 30 minutes. I'll talk to you for 30 minutes. But if it's going to be a lengthy conversation, I will insist that, you have to pay me for my time, and you decide what that rate is, per hour. Then you get into the rates of the actual design work. And for this website, you have design services that they've listed as essentially development of 3 to 4 initial concepts, basically comps that go with it, and the research into it, and any editing they need to do, art editing, I should say. And that's a set price. I will say this: when you present concepts to a client, what you learn in school will be very different to what you're going to do in real life. In school here, we talk about you should do multiple, try and do multiple concepts. I like, for example, in branding, you do, people push you to think of different options, different concepts and so on like that. But in presenting to a client, you're presenting no more than 3 different concepts. If you present more than 3 different concepts, you're inviting trouble, because the more concepts you submit to the client to sort of choose from, the more crazy they're going to say, oh, we have all these options. Oh, I can't think. Oh, can we take a little bit from here? Can we take a little bit from there? Can we take a little bit from here? They try to kind of make their own concoction. And that's what you don't want. You want them to pick a direction that you want them to pick. So the theory is you show no more than 3. Nowadays, a lot of it is breaking down to like, I'm showing you 1 concept alone. That's it. Because I've worked through different concepts through my exploration. So I'm deciding, because you paid me as the creative expert, I'm deciding what option works best. And I'm presenting that option to you. So it's almost like a doctor telling you, hey, well, I diagnosed a terminal illness in you. You need to do this treatment if you want to survive. And you as the patient come back like, nah, I think I want 5 opinions because I think Dr. Joe here is going to give me a better treatment, blah, blah, blah. And in the meantime, the treatment that the doctor is providing is the best and only treatment that works, because you went to them for the expertise. So you generally just want to show 1 to 3 concepts max. Then also in this aspect of here, if there are different aspects of the project that you're going to undertake, such as project management, which means sort of if you're going to contact vendors on the client's behalf, if you're coordinating situations such as like printers, if you're going, if there's print materials that you're going to reach out and work with the printers, the client's not going to work with the printer. So that time should be billable. That time is billable. So you're working with the client, not the client, the printer, or whatever vendor, to assess certain things that need to be done for the success of the project. So you determine what the hourly rate is for that and what the overall length of time it's going to be to present a price, a fee. And then the production is basically all the work that goes into making any of the files and stuff final and ready for use, whether it be electronic, digital, or both. And there's various fees that go in there. Expenses if you had to buy photographic images, typography, illustration, if you had to get in touch with a coder or something, whatever you incurred that you had to out of pocket, that you're going to submit to the client for reimbursement, you put out there in black and white, so there's no miscommunication. And then in this case, because it's a website, there's other consultations that go into play, and so there's additional fees in there. Then lastly, at the end of the estimate, you do have to designate at a time that after the set number of revisions that you're entitled to as the client, and that should be capped at 3 revisions. You don't want to go past more than 3 revisions in the project cycle. And if you do, you want to immediately charge for that time per hour. And that is your production time frame. That's your creative time fee. Because the production fee should be different from the creative fee. The creative fee should always be higher than the production. But if you're going to do additional design revisions past the 3 initial that you're proposing, putting in your proposal, that client needs to pay. And usually what that will happen is that once they see that, they're like, look, we all need to get our stuff together because we're not going to be paying past 3. And it usually works. There's usually no issues with the clients. That I'm just trying to get to the chat. I can't see the chat with the with Keynote and the full screen. It is a nightmare if you do more than 3 options, because in those 3, if you do more than 3 options, it's like a buffet. You don't want your clients to feel like they're in a buffet. You want to make them, basically you want to treat it, oops, sorry, I hit the wrong button. You want to treat it as a dinner, a plate dinner, And what a plate dinner is essentially, this is the dish I'm telling you you're going to have. You don't like it? Too bad. And that's what you want to do. Does everybody see the full screen again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from there, you've done the proposal. You set up the parameters. You told your client, you have the terms and conditions of what you're going to do and so on like that. Now it's come time to submit an invoice, whether it be for a deposit or for the balance of your work. You cannot get paid unless you have an invoice. If someone has hired you to do a job and they don't ask for an invoice, you should be extremely worried, because that means they really don't take their business very seriously. Because that invoice, if I'm paying for services, that's a tax ramification for me. I can either get a break or, I could be liable because I may have more money than I'm claiming because I didn't submit my expenses. So it doesn't even out. And as a designer, you don't submit an invoice, well, there's no trail for to show that of how much work you actually did and what it's worth. So you're going to need to submit that invoice before a project begins. And like I said, never start a job without a deposit. No ifs, no ands, no buts. If you don't, you will learn it the hard way. Don't trust anybody. Do not trust clients until you've established a relationship with that client. Don't trust them. So you submit a 50% deposit. If anyone balks at that 50%, they're going to be a deadbeat. So count your blessings and say bye-bye. You don't want them. Because again, clients that are solid and understand the business and respect the value of your time will not hem and haw at the deposit. It's like, oh, I understand. I'll give you the deposit. Why? If you move, if you hire people to do a job, they hit you up with deposits. Why? Because they don't know you. They don't know if you're going to be doing this job and stuff like that. So if you put a deposit, it's more of a guarantee that you're going to follow through on this. So that's what a deposit will do for us on creatives, because we're trying to also train clients to respect our time, just as they do their doctors, their lawyers, their landscapers, their movers. Their home contract is anybody. And especially there will be bad clients who have a habit of canceling projects before sort of like midway through and not pay. So a deposit enables that you are actually compensated for the time that you did put in. Hold on for a second. Hello, I'm on Zoom. You can create your own invoices. As designers, we all kind of like make our own. I will say I stopped doing that because businesses, a lot of businesses are doing a more web-based sort of software, and so it can't be read. Something that's very designed, like a PDF and stuff like that. It's actually a little bit easier to do web-based software to submit invoices from there because it's not pretty, but at this point, you want your money. You don't care if it's pretty or not. The systems for accounts payables are real basic and it's all PC oriented. And anything outside of that basic sort of minimal black and white kind of structure throws the systems off out of whack. And so your invoice may never be recognized and you may fall down in what's called that AP black hole where they will tell you, we never received your invoice, submit it again. Oh, we never received your invoice. We asked you, submit it again. So you want to keep that in mind. So these examples of when we did design invoices, and some folks still do this. You really just have to know who you are submitting your invoices to, the company, and how their payroll center is and what they do in accounting. You can always ask them how they would prefer you to submit your work. So these are two examples. And like I said, they may look nice and all that, but they will definitely run into problems with automated systems. But in the invoice, basically, this will show you sort of like what's in there. And it's just making certain your contact information is in there, who's going to receive the invoice, description of what the fee breakdown is, what's due. Invoice tracking. So there's always an invoice number so you can check to see which invoices are still outstanding. And then there's other information down there that made terms of what payment conditions are if you don't receive your invoice, a payment within 30 days, that there's an interest rate that's applied to the balance that's outstanding per day. And it's not a heavy interest, it's kind of nominal. But it does take in the factor that, well, you haven't been paid on time, so they need to pay a penalty. Okay, so these are links to invoices. I'm going to actually click on this one, Smashing Magazine. Actually, I'll do create a block. So let me stop.
Professor, can you share this presentation in the email or link to it or something?
Oh, I will.
Okay.
Chrome. Okay. Does everyone see Creative Block invoicing for designers?
Yes, I do.
So Creative Block, this is one site that I put in my resources. But this is my design news site. I go to this all the time to see what's going on, what new trends are happening, what new products and stuff. They have some really good tidbits and stuff like that. And I bookmark pages in there.
We don't see the entire page. We only see like a text.
Yeah, it's.
Oh, I see it stopped. Okay, hold on.
Okay, yeah, we see it now.
Okay. So in here, here they basically are breaking down some simple points about submitting invoicing so that you get paid promptly. Submitting a clear proposal, don't price cheaply. Make your paperwork look good. Again, this is negligible. where again, folks still design it, but at this point with how everything is so automated, it really is best if you want to get paid as quick as you can, that you basically design the invoice, basically a simple template so that it goes through AP without a hitch, nothing gets cut off, because sometimes colors set the AI off to different things and it just delays your invoice. And the one thing you don't want to do is to delay your invoice. And it's just some good tips as to how to make certain that how you submit an invoice will get paid promptly. And so those are some, links in there that you can go in and sort of look at when I post up this presentation. So the next thing to worry about as you freelance in the business, and then just to worry about just being a creative business person, is taxes. There's no getting around taxes, and you want to minimize the amount of taxes that hit your creative aspects. So in addition to pricing carefully, you have you want to also incorporate, okay, what your anticipated tax hit's going to be so that you can sort of put that into your fee. You mark it up a bit. And I will talk about, how do you price work in a later presentation. It'll probably be the same with the job hunting. So taxes. Like I said, there's no escaping them because you're gonna have to pay the feds, the state, and your city taxes, depending on what the city taxes are in your locality. Across the United States, cities have their own different sort of tax codes, so that can be a benefit to you if you are outside of a major metropolitan city. Or if you aren't in a major city, like I know in Florida, there's no state income taxes, so you kind of make out like a bandit with that. But in New York, no, there's no such thing.
Professor,
Yes,
can I ask you something?
sure.
So I know you mentioned like some states like tax you less, right? Like,
Yes. Mhm.
so is that possible to have your business registered at one spot and then you live in another state and use that account? Or is it like together with wherever you live?
It depends on how you actually have your business set up and what state it is. There's no direct answer to that because it really depends on the individual state and city. Because there are guidelines, like if you are registered and you do business in a different state, say you have a PO box and everything is routed to there, but you actually did the work, say in a different state in your home, if the IRS finds that out and that's prohibited by the state law, that particular state law, you're in trouble. Now, because you could forego it. Now, say you're in a state and that there's the thing and you sort of like, well, I'm not going to tell the IRS. You can get away with that, unless there's something in your taxes that flag them like, hey, we may need to take a quicker, deeper look at this. Then you got a lot of making up to do. You got a lot of explanation to roll out there. But it depends on the state and how it works. Like with New York, as I just found out that as they've been doing with work from home, particularly in my company, if you say you live in Jersey, but the business is located in New York, you still have to pay New York state taxes. You can't claim, you can't avoid the tax because you're working from home in Jersey. The company's based in New York, so you have to pay New York taxes. So, like I said, that's all going to come down to what is the particular state's law. And as I said, each of the 50 states have their own sort of thing. It's the federal mandate only pertains to certain things. Then you have to worry about your state and your city taxes. So with that, these taxes are very much you're always going to feel like you're being sucked dry, because there's no nice way to say it, but they're vampires. That's, I mean, I understand the basis and the reasoning as to what taxes are for, but sometimes there's overkill with it. And with taxes, I will say, it's best to really hire an accountant or some tax person and to really understand the nuances of your particular state and city, and how that goes against the federal, to see where you can actually save as much money as you can. Now, as a freelancer, you have to think about taxes very differently than if you're working for someone, because you don't really think about your taxes when you're working as an employee, because it's already done for you. All that work is done. Individually, though, you have to worry about it if you're a freelancer. And so you're going to have to carve out a percentage of what you've gotten. Hello, what's that?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Sorry about that. There won't be this next week. So you have to understand that you're going to have to block off a portion of your creative, the creative fee that you're getting in from the client for those taxes, and you have to place them somewhere separate, away from your personal and any other business expenses, so that when tax time comes around, you have the money to pay them. Because you can sort of overestimate, and if you're paying more, they're going to give it back to you. But you don't want to wind up paying less, because if you're paying less, you know they're going to come for a bigger chunk. And so in that, you can pay taxes when you're self-employed, freelancing. You pay taxes quarterly. A business pays taxes in a quarterly fashion. So you can estimate how much that is, which can make your payments smaller and manageable. Or you can choose to wait until you file, but you may get hit with a bigger payment that you may not be able to handle. So talking with that tax person and accountant about the specifics of your situation will be beneficial. The thing also too is that with just personal taxes, business taxes, you also have to think about sales tax within New York City and New York State. And quite honestly, it is confusing, very confusing. I still am trying to get my head wrapped around it a bit. But essentially the need is that if you provide a client with some tangible product, some tangible goods, such as you created a CD with illustrations on there, you have to put sales tax on it. You have to pay sales tax on it because it's considered an item, a good as sales. If you don't, say for example, you submit your files, you're submitting a file for print via electronically. Well, that's not considered taxable just yet, because there is a bill proposed to tax things that are bought online. And there are groups that are trying to fight that, because it just adds another layer of taxes that just hurts, takes away more money out your pocket. But for right now, as creatives, if you're creating anything that's tangible that they can actually take away, you have to put add sales tax. You have to add sales tax to your overall creative fee. So that way you can pay that to the corresponding tax agency at the end. As I mentioned earlier about some of the services really getting to know, and one of it was legal services. One of the good things in New York City is that we have a group out here that is catering towards the creatives, and they're catered to creatives in all fashions. And it's called the Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts. And as a creative, it's really good to sort of understand the basic legal parameters there of how you create your work and what you can do with it, what you can do if someone steals it, how you can protect yourself, and who you can talk to sort of get some preliminary information. These are all lawyers that are trained to deal with various different topics within the creative arts, and it's both performing arts, visual arts, musical arts, anything within that realm. I cannot vouch for how specific the details are for certain disciplines, but it's a good resource that maybe they can then direct you to someone if it's beyond their scope or beyond the scope of their volunteers. So there's plenty of private practice lawyers that specialize in the field that have a much better understanding of the nuances of the industry because they work for bigger clients and stuff like that. And they can advocate completely for you. But we also know that's going to be a hefty bill that you have to pay for them. So if you ever run into any legal issues, I would suggest talking to the volunteer lawyers for the arts as your first step, just to sort of see what they can do and what they can offer and where they can point you, what direction they can point you into. So essentially, that's sort of some of the basic business aspects of invoicing and making certain you get paid, and making certain that you don't fall into a tax free fall. Because I will share personal experience. When I first started my studio, my ex told me about the quarterlies and stuff like that, and I was like, I'm not gonna pay that. I'll wait. Well, because when I started my studio, I did very well. But because I didn't do the quarterlies and stuff, I got stuck with a tax bill at the end for 20 grand, which blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, 20 grand, how am I gonna pay this off? And that was not a pretty present to get from the IRS. And from that point on, I made certain that, no, we had this taken care of beforehand. So I learned that the hard way. So that's why I'm imparting that, when you do that, definitely take away, partition a portion of your creative fees for those taxes. Even if you overestimate it, you will get the difference back to you. So it's not like you're giving it away for free, but it's better to be a little over than to be under. So outside of that is the flip side, freelancing or just living as a creative is the pitfalls, of life and work as a creative, because it is not like the movies or any of these TV shows. A lot of people think, it's so zen-like. I'm doing all my creative mojo. It's gonna be cool. It's just, I walk in there, I'm on air every day. I get these great projects. It's just cool. No, it's more like this. It's chaos. And it's chaos every day. Now, you have pockets of, tranquility, yes. But for the most part, there's things that's always gonna pop up that's gonna throw things upside down. And you have to learn how to deal with it so that you can balance it so that you get the most tranquility out of this chaos without feeling swamped. And that whole saying of creating work-life balance, there's no such thing as that. It really isn't. At various times, one thing or another will take priority, and you will have to make a choice to miss something, to miss out on something. It's inevitable. You cannot, I don't care what, it's a great mantra that has worked for very people to sell their businesses and their philosophies. But in practicality, there's really no work-life balance. You just have to sort of juggle without sort of tipping everything over, because something is going to take a hit. And you have to be comfortable living with that, and understand that, if it does take a hit, that doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't mean that your life's going out of free fall, that it's downhill from there. It's not. You and everybody else are dealing with the same thing. And it's okay. It's okay that you don't have everything all together and that, you had to drop something, thing is, you can't beat yourself up on it. You have to decide where your red lines are and you stick to them. And red lines are, it's like, okay, this is where I'm not going. I'm not passing this line. This is where I say no. This is where it stops. And establishing those red lines are good for you. And it's also good for your clients. You never want to, when you're doing freelancing, you don't want to be open access to your clients. You want to give them parameters saying that, hey, I can talk with you Monday through Friday between the hours of 9 to 5. I can reach to you on email. The weekends, I won't be doing any work. I won't be able to get in touch with you unless it's a dire emergency. Because the minute you kind of open anything past beyond your red lines, the client will take that and run now. And then you have clients calling you all times of the night, all on the weekends, you're on vacations, because it's like, oh, I just have a quick question. Would that be okay? And you have to say, no, I'm not. This is my personal time. I can't talk to you right now. I will talk to you on Monday. If you ever want to, when you want to get into freelancing, I would always suggest start freelancing earlier in your career, so you can get more into it and you can go through all the hiccups and bumps in there because you're free of responsibilities. Because if you're freelancing later in life, then you run into issues with family, further down the road, marital status, kids, parents, as parents age, and where they're taking care of you, there will be times where you have to take care of your parents, and that's going to start running into conflict with your freelance life. And so freelancing earlier and getting those sort of hiccups and bumps done early on is better than going through it later on in life. Say you're working for a company, you've worked 10 years. That's all you've done, 10 years full-time work. You've never done freelance or anything like that. It's going to be a culture shock to try and start freelancing at 10 years, especially at 10 years. You figure there's going to be more responsibilities going on, so you won't have the freedom to do and be adventurous that you can say when it's been 3 years, and maybe 10 years is still short. Definitely as you go beyond that, it gets more complicated. But there's also a trade-off when you're freelancing between being creative and taking care of business administration. I would suggest when you're doing freelancing that you separate times that you're working on the non-creative roles on a separate day than your creative days. Keep them separate, so that you don't mess up your creative flow, your creative mojo. Because if you're trying to be creative on the same day you're trying to figure out some business, it's going to blow your mind. You won't be creative. So you want to schedule those days. It's going to help your sanity, and it helps keeps your creative juices going. Because again, speaking from experience, trying to be creative and hit a deadline, and I got to take care of some invoices, or there's some tax liability, or I'm trying to assess some sort of copyright issue that may be happening on a project, it doesn't make you very creative. So you want to discipline your mind against those distractions as you freelance. And it's also a good philosophy to keep that in mind when you're working full-time too, to sort of keep your mind against these distractions. But you will get distracted, and that's fine. The thing is how do you handle it when you do get distracted? Don't flip out. Don't feel like, oh, you can't get back into the groove. You might not, but don't put too much pressure on yourself about it. Just accept it and you say, okay, well, maybe this is a creative day that's bust. I'll try again tomorrow. Just accept it, move forward, and give yourself time to space it out. And you'll see that, yes, that's going to happen. You will come back with a fresh mind and reinvigorate. And definitely, if at all possible, keep your weekends free from any kind of business work, whether it be, and that applies to both full-time and freelance. Keep your weekends for yourself. Keep those weekends for what interests you, to do stuff, so that way it just, helps recharge your creative battery. I will say full-on working maybe 12 hours in a day, 5 days a week for X number of years, I don't feel that same creative energy on the weekends. I don't want to work. I don't want to do anything. And sometimes that bleeds into and it has bled into my personal creative time, where I haven't really created anything or done any personal creative projects in over 10, 15 years. And it's kind of a bummer for me because I want to get back into it, but you know, there's so many things that I've had going on the weekends that I just don't do it. And it definitely helps to keep work away from that on the weekends. So when you talk about keeping weekends free from work, that also means no emails, no calls, and you have to say to yourself, no exceptions. You start making one exception, you'll make another exception, and then next thing you know, the gates are open and your rules are out the window. Now and then you're working 7 days a week. Yeah. Anybody have any questions at the moment?
I have a lot. I just I don't know if I should like make you stop every time.
Yeah, throw out some questions.
Okay, first of all, so it looks like you're talking about like positive and negative of freelance. Looks like it could be a little bit stressful.
Oh, it is
especially-
stressful. It's no, it
Yeah.
can't be. It is.
Yeah, like you have to discipline yourself
Mhm,
and like feels like the hardest part could be not to be distracted actually, because it's not something that you have to do kind of.
mhm.
So that's you did a freelance
Yes.
in your career a lot.
Yeah, I had a studio for 5 years. And prior to that, I would always freelance every year. I have not freelanced probably since 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And that was by choice. I just sort of wanted to take a little breather and just concentrate more on just the day to day, just because my personal life was just so busy. But freelancing, it's great. But the thing is, I'm also trying to paint a true picture. You know, and like I said it in the beginning, it's not all unicorn and roses. It's real. It's like, you know, there's great days, but there are some bad days, and that you have to expect it and know how to deal with it. And then knowing that, oh, okay, well, got a bad day. It's not forever. It's going to disappear. You know, and ways to how to deal with that. You know, but distractions are one of the biggest things because freelancing, usually it will be within your own space, you know, and depending on what that space is, it can be easy to get distracted. Like, oh, I'll just watch my show for half an hour, and then it's 5 hours later, like, oh my God, I got to finish this. Or, you know, I'm hungry. And then next thing you're having a pig fest, or a friend comes over, like, I'll just talk to you 5 minutes. And then next thing you know, it's the next day. You know, it's like, oh man, what happened? Why'd you keep talking so long? You know, so distractions when you're working, you know, as yourself is one of the battles that you have to learn how to deal with. I mean, you never really accomplish it 100%, but as long as you can sort of know and recognize, okay, I'm getting distracted, I understand it, but I'm not going to let this happen too long. You're in a better space than like if you just totally ignore it and like, oh, that didn't happen, you know, and then it's like, well, yeah, it did. So what are you going to do about it? You know, and to me, that's in my personal opinion, I think distractions are up there just as creatives, because creatives, we're easily distracted. And then after that, the next thing would be in terms of the business aspect, you know, and that essentially just getting paid and making certain that we don't get ripped off. You know, that's the second biggest worry as a freelancer.
But you would prefer, if it was up to you right now, like what do you prefer?
Oh, me right now? Well, for my
Yeah.
situation, where I'm at right now, full time. Eventually, I'm actually going to start freelancing again a little bit later in the year to get back into some projects because I'm interested in that. It may not be necessarily freelancing for money. It's more maybe pro bono work. But I'm looking at probably fall 2021 to get back into that, unless I start it late summer. But I'm definitely I'm putting on track for fall 2021 to do it. And eventually maybe I'll do freelance full time again. But I'll be 54 this year, so it's like I don't have that many days left for that. So
That's not true. Yeah.
yeah, so it's because if I do freelance, I mean, I will always freelance. I don't see myself giving up work. I can see me pulling back on a full-time job in the next 10 years, because I still feel like I got good another 20 years behind me, because I like working in an office. I like that camaraderie. I also like working by myself, but I just don't like doing all that business stuff. Which I know if I do this again, I will actually hire somebody that is business or someone to do all the business, but that's going to require time and relationships and stuff like that. So that's what I prefer right now. Is I prefer the in-house, where if I'm going to do any freelance, I can do pro bono work, where I just sort of do stuff that I really care about, and I just want to be, kind of help out. I'm not trying to get any extra money from. That's where my head's at my station of life.
Got it. Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, get back into it. So with being a freelancer, same thing as running a business, we all have to understand one thing. So when you're working for someone as an employee, your cash flow is steady because you got a job. You get paid like clockwork every 2 weeks. Or if you got a bi-monthly schedule, which from experience, I say, if someone's offering you bi-monthly, see if you can get out of that, because that means you only get paid twice a month, the 15th and the last day of the month. And that sucks. I'm telling you, that sucks. It sucks. It sucks. Because there are some months where, it stretches out 3 weeks, and depending on where you are financially, that can hurt versus being paid bi-weekly, which is every 2 weeks, like clockwork. And also if you're paid bi-weekly, you get 2 extra free checks every year, because it's 52 weeks. So you get paid 26 times versus if you get paid the 15th and the last day of the month, which breaks out to just 24 times a year. So there's advantages to stuff on that. But as an in-house designer, you're not worrying about your cash flow because your paycheck's coming. But if you're freelancing or you're running your own business, the cash flow is not steady. It's erratic. And there's going to be days where it's extremely tight. And then there's the days where it's extremely flush. It's like as I say, you will be riding fat and full on cash. And those are the days you have to be careful because you can kind of lose your mind. Now, the thing is, you want to prepare and live in no matter what time, whether it's flush or if it's tight. You want to be balanced so that you keep the 2 extremes away, so you stay afloat. Because if you don't deal with the extremes, you won't survive. So you want to develop a philosophy of spending conservatively in both your lean and flush times, so that it just becomes automatically routine. So your cash flow is steady and guaranteed, as best as it can be, and there's less of an impulse expenditures to happen, because those impulse expenditures will drain your reserves, your cash reserves. Because both as a freelancer and as a business, you want to put aside, a cash reserve. It's like what we do individually when we save for a rainy day. You want to put aside for those emergencies. That's what a cash reserve is as a freelancer in a business. If you need to tap into, you have this cash if, say, certain invoices haven't come in the time they were supposed to. The thing is also, as you freelance, run a business, anything, but particularly as a freelance, do not spend any money that you have not actually received. You may say, oh, I have an invoice coming in. I can get me that new iMac now. Invoice was supposed to come in, then it shows up. You spent $2,000, but you don't have no way to cover that $2,000. Now you're in a hole because you spent money that you actually get. So with your fees, you never want to spend anything that you have not actually received from your client. It's a lesson that we all learn the hard way. It's all the perks of just being an emerging designer. You got to go through it and stuff like that, because no one ever told me any of this when I first started. Hopefully by me sharing this, that, it does help you guys kind of avoid some of the mistakes that I did, going into the industry, and what a lot of us have done going into the industry. The one thing, not the one thing, but one of the most important things that can actually cripple your business is debt. Now, there's good debt and there's bad debt, but you really don't want to take on too much debt, because that's an expenditure. That's stuff you owe. So when you do get money in, the first thing you have to do is take care of that debt. So try your best not to take out loans, a line of credit. Definitely don't use your credit cards for business unless you have a solid financial plan that you know how to cover those liabilities in case those funds don't come in. So if you don't have a strategic plan for that, the best thing is don't spend anything. Just leave it alone. And then you don't have to worry about it. But essentially, as a freelancer, or just as if you're trying to do a small studio, you have to understand the basics of finances, because no one's going to be invested in it as you are. You will always be your number one line of defense. You're your best advocate. So you have to, excuse me, understand what these nuances are and what is entailed with it. So now we come into the reality check aspect of the creative arts. That, most of the projects you're going to work on will not be the creative bombs that we all imagine, that I'm going to work on the most spectacular project that's going to be out there. Most of them are really going to be practical and functional, because they're going to serve your client's needs first, whether that's in-house or freelance. They're not the sort of gold star fantasy design projects. You will work on those throughout your career, but the basic day-to-day stuff is going to be the practical ones. That's what we really will all be working on. Now that's not to belittle any of the work that we're doing as the practical stuff. That can be fun and enriching as well too. But it's fundamental to understand and what you're walking into. Because I know when I started doing this, the creative group I was with, my classmates, you all talk about these grand dreams, like, yeah, I'm going to work for this top-notch company, we're going to be working on this and that, because we don't know any better, thinking that, oh yeah, I'm going to be in the design suite and I'll be traveling and all that. No, that's not how you're going to start out and stuff. You have to earn your way up to that. But there just needs to be a practical sense of what you're going to anticipate when you're working throughout your career. Because starting off, it's pretty much everyone has to pay their dues a bit. You have to kind of prove yourself out there. So when you're working, it's really not going to be about you. The design will matter, but it won't be a testament to your design ego. So as I was mentioning about critiques, that's where early on when you're starting, that you don't take these critiques personally, because it's not about your design. It's about whether or not it's meeting these particular goals that are set for the project. But as young designers getting into this stuff, we do kind of take it a little bit more personally, because we don't have any sort of context on how this stuff works within the realm, which is why I've introduced and talked about critique on that. So when you're looking for sort of your own creative expression, that's where the personal projects are actually going to serve for that. If sometimes people will take assignments because they just need to take assignments, or they're working on stuff, they like it, but it's not really pushing what they really want to do. That's really, the stuff you do on your side kind of helps serve some of that creative expression. But sometimes the creative expressions are going to take a hit because of career responsibilities. If, like I said, you could be working a pretty big week and you just may not be feeling all that creative at the end of the week. So you just sort of zone out, and that's fine, because again, there's no correct work-life balance. It's a matter of juggling things, and some things will take priority over others because of the responsibilities we have. And the deeper you get into your career, and the deeper you get into your own personal life, those responsibilities are going to grow. Now, being your own boss can get boring and isolating, which is why you have to actually work to get out that feel. When you first start and you're working yourself, it's like, oh, it's cool, I can do this, I can do that. But in the long run, you're gonna sort of yearn for that sociability factor that one has been associated with in school, what one associates with when working in-house and stuff like that. So working, if you're working solo, you want to be out there. And so you want to go out and take breaks to be social with friends. Sometimes clients can turn into friends. I've had some clients that I've worked with that we've developed friendships. Some vendors you'll work with have turned into personal relationships, like a photographer I had hired years ago to do work for me. We've developed a friendship. I mean, he's been part of my life for like almost 25 years. So it's not even business, it's more of a personal relationship. So, you want to not fall into this work vacuum. So you want to create these social environments and with these friends, to even freelancers you may hire. So being a boss also means your own personal relationships are going to take hits from time to time. As I said, work-life balance, things will always take a hit. So depending on how strong your relationships are, both friendships and personal, will determine how well it's going to make it. But you have to be cognizant that, sometimes maybe the relationship wasn't solid enough, or it's a maturity level, maybe folks are not on the same page and stuff like that. But just like anything else, as your responsibilities hit, things start getting stretched because, we're all human. We only have 24 hours in a day, and we can only do but so much and be at so many places. Also too, now in reality check, you want to be relevant. You want to stay on top of your game. You have to know what's going on. So you want to keep up to date on what's happening within the industry you're in, from where the people are moving from job to job, because then that tells you sort of like, oh, there may be some openings, or there may be some new projects going on. M&A is what we call as merger and acquisitions. See what companies merge, because they could be, building out, looking for new leaders, or they could lay off certain departments. So you kind of know what the good and bad is of it. Keeping up to date on as technology changes and how it affects your industry, because nowadays technology is changing too quick now. So things that you learn 3 months ago may not be relevant 3 months later. And then industry shifts, like COVID made every industry shift in the last year and a half. And so you want to know how your industry shifts and to see how you can fit in it to survive and to come out of it on the other end stronger. Those are all the things that a good creative wants to do, should do to sort of keep themselves valuable and up to date as to what's going on within the industry. The other aspect of the reality check as a creative is, in my instance, designing while I'm Black, but it'd be designing while the other now, because the industry, the graphic design industry, has done better strides in terms of equality and inclusion and diversity than, say, the advertising industry. And so to just be perfectly frank, that everyone should be aware of what industry they're getting into, is to sort of like how the culture is and how the philosophy is in terms of whether or not everyone's voices and work is recognized, because there are double standards within the industry. And that like I said, that's a societal work in progress. But generally, if you happen to be outside the stereotypical norm of, you know, the white male, and even in that, there's contexts of white males that are also the other, it's the folks who generally are in power that don't, and it's still the egotistical folks that don't really want to hear from anybody else. And so with that, it puts an unfair burden that folks have to be twice as good to sort of prove their worth. And it's like I said, certain industries are making very good strides in combating that and getting rid of that old philosophy. And then there's others that are still working on it. But then there's perceptions at times that people will walk into that, if they hire you, that might mean that your services are cheaper or less demanding, particularly if you're freelancing, and you want to be able to acknowledge, okay, yeah, that exists out there. This is how I'm going to deal with it, And so there's also the perception that, you can only design for your own particular demographic. In my case, as a Black male, I can only design within the Black community now. And it's a misnoming perception now. Even when you sort of showcase that, no, that's not the case, there's still this sort of perception that, okay, you may not be enough of the demographic to speak the demographic, which is essentially just double talk to say, well, they don't want to hire you because they're just prejudicial, period. That's all it is, but they can't do that legally. So, like I said, that has been addressed in some industries, and like I said, good strides in some, others not so case. But the only way that actually works to change overall is you have to be an advocate for yourself, and if you see that happening in your work environment, to your colleagues, no matter who you are, it's fundamentally up to you to stand up and point it out and say, hey, this is not cool. This is not going to happen. And so it's just not white folks that have that perception. It is also all of the others that also have the perception, such as, for example, for me, being as a Black man, sometimes folks think because I happen to be Black that, we may share the same skin color, that, hey, I should be doing this for free. Give me the hookup. And I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. And business is business, And again, it's this perception that you're trying, that if you don't, well, guess what? You're really not you're not down for the cause. You're not helping us out, And it's basically a selfish aspect, and really just to get what they want, something for nothing. Then there's the perception that you're, if you don't fit this mold, that your work won't be as good enough as the quote model white designer. Because I know, within graphic design, and society, the whole backlash and stuff, everyone likes to paint like, the white designer is the issue and stuff. And that is not the case, because as with every community, there is such a sort of labeling within every community that is just, I don't know where it comes from, and I don't know how it comes to be, but it's a good excuse for folks not to do what they want to do. But the more folks are aware of it, and the more folks actually step up and say, hey, look, that's not going to happen, helps bring it down. So from when I first started in the industry to now, it has changed quite a bit, and it still has more work to do. But folks are much more vocal across the board, which is really good. Now, granted, it is a generational thing. It's more younger folks than the older folks. A lot of the older folks are stuck in their ways. So it's you guys, it's your generation that's really talking and voicing and putting this out there. There's also that crabs in a barrel mentality out there. That if someone's doing well, then, and since I'm doing this, I can't say this word right now because of my kid here, but, there's always that one hole out there that wants to take everyone down. And you got to learn how to navigate them because they're never going to disappear. They're always out there. And the thing is, you have to learn how to sidestep them so that they fall flat on their own energy and not yours. Because you're not trying to transfer your energy to them. And then there's folks that, within the same community feel like, well, if they're seen as, they're seen with their same, their community, talk with the community, associate with folks that, somehow, ooh, that's a bad omen. And again, it's another idiotic sort of perception and mentality that, again, surfaces from society, because all this stuff comes within society. And so, I mean, no industry is immune from any of this. The good thing with the creative industry is that we express ourselves. And so we'll put this work into our work and into our expressions and so on, which is why the creative industry is always the first to be involved with sort of social causes and putting the spotlight on things that are unjust and so on. That all being to said is that, you as a creative, you have to guarantee and make certain your voice is heard no matter what. Make yourself seen and always engage with your clients, your coworkers, your bosses. The reason why I say that is if you don't use your voice, you don't demand your voice, if you don't make your presence known, all in positive and constructive ways, you'll be overlooked and someone else will take your voice and speak for you. And then it's too late. And that happens a lot across the job and just in every business is that, you have folks who have strong personalities that, always talk, that advocate for themselves. Sometimes you have folks who do that a little too strongly. And then you have folks who just sort of fade in the backside that don't want to make ripples, but then they get overlooked. And so no one ever thinks about bringing them onto a project, leading a project or anything like that, and then if they actually do finally speak out, they're not really taken seriously because it's like, oh, I didn't know you had a voice. I didn't know you could talk, and so they're kind of dismissed. So I just implored everybody to, make sure your voice is heard, speak to, especially if you see your fellow creative team, coworkers, or if you see something that's not correct, that is, that goes against the overall success or just the common decency of just working in the business environment, you speak up, make certain that it's not just swept away or anything, particularly when you're doing creative presentations and stuff. It goes into that too, that if you are not sort of, as you pitch and you just sort of like fade in the background, you may have a very good concept, but it's never going to really be seen or heard as the light of day because you sort of faded out. So the perception is going to be, well, that's really not that strong. So why should we pay attention to it? So perception is something that's really powerful that we as creatives can actually counter. So getting off of that soapbox on there, we're coming down to the close of this. Is the one thing I want to talk about is one of the last things I want to talk about is, as creatives, you might have seen work for like, oh, we're looking for a designer to create our website with a social media campaign, blah, blah, blah. And we'll choose from the best submissions. And from the best submissions, we will then present to you a gold star. Let's say that. Those are that's called spec work. So essentially people are asking you to actually create a viable project based off of the hope of getting something. So essentially it's a theft of services. It's getting something for nothing. Spec work is doing free work on the hope that, oh, if they like it, I'm going to get paid for it or something like that, which is very different than offering your services to an organization or a company as pro bono. You're sort of giving the value of your services in exchange for the group. And usually pro bono is geared towards helping some sort of social cause. Whether that social cause is something it's usually related to the designer's interest. Because if you're going to do pro bono, you're doing it because you're interested in it, not because someone just called you up and said, hey, can you just do this for us? No, it's going to be something that actually strikes you. You have a strong interest in it. But it's important to understand the difference between the two and which one is actually good to do and versus which one is wrong to you to do, and which is exploitive. And that's spec work. What is spec work? As I said, simply put, it's being asked to submit partial or completed work. A lot of times it's real completed work that, I mean, you would get paid quite a nice sum for that kind of work for a prospective client before getting any fees. Nowadays, they guise it in these design competitions, and the design community does speak out about it because it is just getting, it's robbery, is getting free work without paying for it. But there are some instances where it will be legit, but depending on the scope of it. And I haven't seen any recent one, but if I come across some old links, I'm going to show some examples of what that is, or at least I'll post it in the overplay, the replay, I should say. But these competitive contests have now reached higher levels. The Olympics, cities, city governments, I should say, because I believe there was such a competition over in either Florida or Colorado, where they wanted a rebranding for the city. And they caught a lot of heat on it, and they rescinded it and saying that, oh, they didn't know and stuff like that, which they did. Sometimes people will use it as a way to say it's a way to judge your skills for a particular job. Now, it's fine if a company asks to test your technical skills, like, oh, you say you know how to do InDesign. Can you put together this quick little flyer to see how you build something in InDesign? Okay, that's fine. That's no big deal. Versus something like, oh, we have this feature that's going to run. Can you build this story and a cover for it? It's a story we're actually running in our next issue. We just like to see, and if we like it, we'll actually use it in the issue now. But we want to kind of get a gauge of how you do your work. That's a complete ripoff. Now you're giving away free work for nothing with no guarantee of anything. In any of those situations, the designers lose all rights to your work in those situations. So you can't come and say, hey, you used my work in that next issue. Can you pay me $2,500 for it? We never hired you. You did that voluntarily. We just asked to see, and you did it. No. So it's a way to get set up. It's a manipulative and an exploitive process to get free work, which is very different than pro bono. Pro bono work is services that are offered for free or at cost to a benefit or cause or to the general public. And what it means by at cost is that you've done the work. Say it's an annual report for a local not-for-profit, and generally your annual report design fee is about $2,500. So you would submit them an invoice for $2,500, but in it you would put a clause in there saying, in lieu for services rendered, I forgot the exact legal wording, but services rendered are valued at $2,500 given to said corporation at cost now. And essentially what that can happen, what that does is that it's a tax benefit to the not-for-profit as well as for yourself. So it can help lessen your tax bill as a freelancer, and it helps lessen their tax bill, their expenses for stuff as a client. But in pro bono work, you as a designer, you retain all your copyrights unless you transfer it in writing to the entity that is using your services. So you keep that, and if they wanted to reproduce it in some other form, they have to approach you and negotiate usage fees for it. And as I said, there's beneficial tax implications with pro bono services for you and the company, but not with volunteer. If you volunteered your time, that's volunteering is not necessarily tax beneficial, but pro bono is. And again, it's one of those murky things in the tax code. But this is a poster that designer called Von Glickster. He's a designer and illustrator. Created this campaign, No Spec. And this is the poster he created, which was from like the early 2000s. And this is still the website that's up there. You don't see Van's work up there as much now. So I'm not sure how much involved he's still with it, but this was the initial attempts that he was doing with AIGA. And it was pretty cool. Pretty cool. Because it is like sort of taking a loaded gun and shooting yourself, because you're giving your work away, but you're hurting your own self by giving it away. And these are some examples of those sort of what I would classify as sort of spec work, even though you are getting paid, but I mean, you're getting paid very minimally. And these are what's called crowdsourcing sites, site called CrowdSpring. I would guess everyone's kind of heard of 99 Designs. It's kind of like Fiverr. And then Canva, because I mean, Canva's got a huge media campaign out there. And with Canva, I'm not going to say that's necessarily a design crowdsourcing, but I'm going to, as I get to talk about, it's a little different. But with CrowdSpring and 99 Designs, I just did a screen capture from their site as to, the package cost for some of the work, like a logo and identity. If you're a business looking to get a logo with a business card, if you go through CrowdSpring, you can pay $4.99, $499, and you get a logo, business card, letterhead, and envelope. In the particulars, you will also see that you will get like something like 10 different options, because you're getting that 10 different options from their well of designers that signed up. So out that fee, these designers get for any of their concepts that are accepted, they get a nominal cost back to them, and it's not the $4.99. Now some of them have changed some of it because they gotten into legal issues. Before, they used to get maybe $25 or $35 for a completed work. Now they're supposed to get much more of the creative fee. So minus CrowdSpring's expenses, or these are sources, maybe they walk away at $400, whoever the quote winning designer is. Now, can a logo and a business card with letterhead and envelope actually be worth $4.99 or $400? It could, but I mean, I don't know what you're really going to get for that, because of the time spent in there, you've lost so much money on that. Because honestly, I know for me, for example, if I'm going to do an identity, bare minimum, it's going to cost you $1,500. And with that, you get the logo. Maybe, because I always include at least a one sheet brand guidelines, so because you don't know what to do with the logo, so I'm going to give you some basic instructions on how to use a logo. And that's about it. I'm not offering up anything else with that. If you want anything else, you got to negotiate for that. And in these, this is basically doing this sort of a la carte service. Because a lot of times the designers they contract are not necessarily based in the US, they're from developing countries. And so it's exploitive. because they also offer the clients unlimited revisions, which is not fair. Same thing with 99 Designs. They go up a little bit, and this is about websites. So you have say a landing page design from 349. So they're telling you that's not the total package. Even CrowdSpring has now done 499. So in here they do a bidding. You go in and you bid how much you will charge. Most of the companies are going to go for the low ball bid. So you're not going to get a really great landing page for 349. You're just not. How much work actually are you going to be putting into that? Now, Canva is a little bit different, where Canva trying to serve to bring design to the layperson. So it's like templates that are done where they actually pay designers a particular fee to do it. So it's a little bit better. But what I don't like about Canva per se is that it kind of normalizes that a la carte service about design. It's like, why should I pay a designer to fully vet and research my design problem when I can go online, use some templates that 2 million other people are also going to use too for my company? Because why do I care about having my brand be that distinct and have a strategy? And if I see someone that has a logo just like me, I'll just take them to court. Well, guess what? You can't. These are templates, so they're immune from infringement and restrictions. So there's an argument that these serve a particular purpose for a particular market. And yes, I guess they do. Because if you're willing to go to CrowdSpring for your design work, that saves you coming to me. Because then I don't have to shut you down and embarrass you. So this is a capitalist country and society. So hey, if you can make money this way, if you got clients that work, fine by you. Now, this is just not how I value what I'm doing. Oh yeah, that was the last one. So that's basically a really sort of, I guess, Cliff Notes version of some basics of understanding how to be your own boss and what you need to look out for. And if you're doing any work for yourself, you're your own boss, whether it be as a solo freelancer, or if you're actually trying to build a studio or an agency and stuff like that. Everyone's going to go through the same issues, the same concerns, the same worries that are there. It just gets magnified on the scale that you're in now. So, hopefully that was informative, that it gave some insight onto stuff. Anyone have any questions? Let me actually stop this before I get.
Is it possible to do freelance while they're in-house?
Yeah, that's what I was saying in the beginning, that like, that's the best time to start doing. That way you can do all the mistakes because you got a job. So there's not that pressure, versus if you're trying to freelancing, you're trying to figure out, okay, is my rent paid? Can I get some dinner? What am I going to do? So definitely you would want to start freelancing. I should rephrase it and saying that definitely if you're working already, that's where a good time to start sort of getting into the freelance field to see how it is, if you like freelancing, because some people do not like freelancing. And they don't want to all have their own business. They don't want to be their own boss. They're quite fine in-house, and that's fine. This is, I'm putting this out there so that, if you are interested, hey, at least you know more than what you didn't know before.
When you mentioned the specs on pro bono, I liked something I read recently that I never thought about, that they said you should invoice everyone, even the free work, so they understand just how much,
They
the
should.
job would have cost or like saved. And I really like that idea.
I would definitely agree with that. And as a side note on that, I personally advocate never to do business with friends or family. Family comes over, oh, can you design, you created, can you design me a poster for Jimmy's 25th birthday?
Literally got one of those before your class started.
Yeah. So we give you a piece of pie or something, No. because friends and family will take advantage of everything because they're not valuing what you're doing. Because one, they don't
True.
understand what you do. You
I think
know,
it's a quick thing you throw together.
yeah, they just
Mhm.
feel like, well, you're a friend, you're my family. You should just automatically do it.
Mhm.
No, I don't. If I was doctor, would you automatically think I should just
Or free
perform
procedure.
surgery on you for free? No, that's not how it's going to work. And so that's what we as creatives have to get folks to do. Now, you could, that's a personal choice, working for friends and family, but I've been burned. And so my motto is, no, I don't do it. I won't do it. Someone asked me, I'm like, well, guess what? I'll tell you somebody else who might do it. Talk to them, but don't talk to me. But yeah, I would agree with the philosophy of invoice everyone so they understand the value and the time of what's in it. So they can, it's about educating them as well, so that next time around, maybe they will say, okay, hey, we know how much this was. Let's see if we can actually put together some money for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Also, I thank you for like explaining the taxes. I think that's a topic that not many people really like to explain.
I hate taxes. And that's the, and again, I put the disclaimer, I am not a tax accountant. I only can tell you my experience. So if you have some issues with taxes, talk to a tax person, an accountant. Thank you. But that's the little bit I know of taxes, because taxes is the one thing that we don't think about, but it's the one thing that actually can come and bite us back in our ass, that you just can't get rid of them. They just grow out of nowhere, and so as creators, we don't really think about it, and definitely as students, no one thinks about it or anything. And folks get real upset when they get their first job and they get their first check, and they're like, yo, why am I paying all this for taxes? Guess what? Welcome to the real world, because it takes a huge chunk out your paycheck, just as in your freelance, like you get that full solid creative fee, like you did a job for 2,500. Well, if you didn't put away at least 25% of that for taxes, just in case, you're gonna get surprised. So it's it's just my personal takeaway from having gone through school, that I just feel that it's something that should be thrown out there that folks should be aware of earlier than later. And taxes, just so that everyone understands, you really have questions on taxes, to really talk to a tax person, because they can find you so many loopholes out there, if you have loopholes, because sometimes you may not have anything to really in your life that you can actually use to sort of get around taxes. But it is really beneficial to talk to someone who's tax oriented to understand it, and just basically understand that you will get hit with taxes. So anybody else have any questions?
I actually wanted to ask about when you talked about even like you don't care if it's a first job or second or third or whatever.
Mhm.
Like I know I had to do like a couple of times, and even like today I was thinking about. Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking about like what's the best way to like have LLC. And before I did, like I saw the representative from the Bank of America, and I realized like I only have like one freelance job a year basically.
Mhm.
So it was not worth like paying monthly. I don't know what it was, like $30 for the bank account,
Yeah.
and I was like getting, let's say, 500 a year.
Yeah. Well, setting up an LLC has nothing to do with the bank, because the thing is with some banks, even their basic, you're going to pay a fee for a basic checking account. Now, if there's no money coming in that warrants that business checking account, like if you, like TD Bank has probably the best basic business account, where I think that, and they may have changed it since I last had TD Bank, but it was nominal. I mean, it was like $5. I was like, yeah, I could do this. You know, even if I don't have anything coming in, I'll pay the $5 because it's just $5. I'm like, all right, you know, just so I can have that account open. So if I do take on a job, I can put my check that's made out to my company, my LLC, and put it into that bank. But Bank of America, I already know their fees are already high. Now, Bank of America, Chase, although Chase does have a basic one, but you got to read the fine print. So the big banks will now have some of the bigger fees, but it's a homework that you have to kind of do to see to assess what their bare bone basics are, because they don't want to talk about their bare bone basics. They kind of put everyone to the next level. Yeah, and people don't seem to ask for like, well, do you have anything smaller that or lower than that level and stuff? Because that's how they make their money, through the fees. But the LLC, definitely just opening that would be beneficial. Now, depending on the state, whatever state it is, there's certain things that you have to do. And like, for example, I learned the hard way that I opened up my LLC. You have to get what's called a registered agent. That's sort of, or at least I thought you had to get a registered agent in New York that does the administrative work of filing certain documents with the state and all that. And they required $189 a year to do that. And I was like, all right, you know, it's kind of steep, I'll do it. But then I learned that I didn't have to pay them $189 a year. New York State doesn't require you to have a registered agent. You can register the one document that needs to be registered by LLC for yourself for only $9. And I was like, oh man, I got ripped off, you know? So the thing is, it's like, you know, you just have to understand some of the parameters as to like what's beneficial, what's not beneficial. The LLC is beneficial because you do one flat rate, one fee to set that up. And then all the other stuff, unless you're a really active LLC, like if you have board of directors and all that, then that goes into a whole different story. But as just a freelancer, it's just usually you. There's very minimal work that you have to do with it. You just file one necessary, it's a biannual statement. And it basically just kind of talks about that you are in business and that, you know, that's it, you know, just filing that. So, but the banks, you know, again, if you don't have anything coming in, then maybe you want to hold off before getting a bank account. You know, if you can't get a really basic one, like you could wait until you actually have a real big, not real big, but a juicy client to come in, and then you just set up a basic one with that. You know, but yeah, you do have to be aware that the banks do charge fees, and that you have to read some of the fine print with not only the LLC organizations, but the banks and all that other stuff. If you dig enough, you'll see there's sections there that you can actually do stuff that doesn't cost you money per se. But having the LLC sets up is just more of a legal protection, so that my personal money is never touched now, and all my personal assets are not part of the business.
Okay, that's limited liability.
Yes, that's what LLC is. Yeah, it's limited liability. So it's like, it's not like a full-on corporation that has extensive protections. This is meant for a certain, and usually LLCs are for smaller businesses and individuals to sort of protect their personal property, because we live in a society that is a very sue-happy society, and everybody will sue everybody and their mother. You know, I don't like this logo. I'm suing you for $1 million because you hurt my feelings, you know, and they can sue you, you know, and if they win, they can take your personal stuff, you know, so the LLC protects you from that.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's great to know. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Professor, I just want to say, like, this was very, like, this presentation gave me a lot. I really appreciate.
Good, good. Like I said, it's Cliff Notes version. Oh, I never updated this. Oops. Or did I? Yes, I did. It's Cliff Notes version. So, I mean, this is just sort of tips, really simple tips. You would want to go in deeper to understand certain things. And there's lots of books out there that are geared towards the creatives. I will actually put up some book listings that are geared towards, sort of helping establish your freelance business, or just helping you just establish a freelancer presence. So you just don't get ripped off, because beginning designers are ripe for getting exploited by big corporations, businesses, and stuff like that. Because if you don't come in from a strength of knowledge, it's quite easy to be manipulated into something that you'll regret later. So it's just, to me, it's just as important as learning the fundamentals of design to learning the basic fundamentals of working in design. So with that, that's my presentation on the art and design of entrepreneurship. I thought I'd be over by 8. But there's not going to be much in terms of homework because, like I said, this week has been scattered. And so what the only thing is that, I'd just like folks to now start after some of the homework from week 9 is to sort of now start going and really now defining what your final summary is going to the final defining of your summary into your narrative for your final presentation, as well as continue sort of building and thinking of your conceptual exploration now. And at this point, we are now at week 10. So at this point, I will continue to put links up for process posts, and I would love to see the process posts, but at this point, in terms of the number of required uploads have passed, so at this point on, this is to me all gravy, just extra for me to see how you're working. If you haven't posted up at least 5 times, then I'd like to see, see post up. I'd like to see you post 5 times so I can see your work. But I would still encourage everyone to just, sort of post if you have monumental changes within your process book, because each week there should be things going on. And it just kind of helps me see where everyone's at. But that's pretty much what I'm only expecting folks to do up until next week. It's just to really continue doing what you're doing while you're waiting for me to get back to you with my feedback on your summary presentations. And then next week, we really will start, jumping more into, looking at some of where everyone's at with these transitions into your final presentation. Does anybody have any questions on that or any concerns?
I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
By the way, thank you for the presentation. It was very informative and you definitely touched on a lot. So thank you for that. But I have a question about the homework. So in terms of the visual direction for project 1, how many visual components are you looking for? So I want to start sketching this week. I'm not sure how many different ideas I should bring to the table, so to speak.
Well, in your sketching, I mean, you work out as many concepts as you feel the best answer to that is you sketch out as many concepts as you feel explain what you're trying to do or explore what you're trying to do. I'm essentially looking for one strong concept, because it should be built on the basis of your summary work that you've been working on. So if that's solid, I'm only really looking, when we start looking at these visual directions, one conceptual approach, and as we talk, if I think the conceptual approach is a little off mark because the summary kind of misses the mark on some things, we'll discuss that as such. But I'm not looking for folks to work on multiple concepts for this to just decide on one. No, you know, in the sketching, I mean, as natural sketching, yeah, you kind of mess around with 2 or 3 things, different sort of buds of ideas in that. But you should be leaning towards one particular direction, like, you know, yeah, I think this one really kind of feels right. And so this is what I'm going to, you know, explore completely out. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, that's helpful. I just wasn't sure, but you clarified. So thank you for that.
Okay, you're welcome. Anybody else have any questions or need some clarifications? Oh, actually, I can stop sharing this. I just realized that. Here we go. So everybody's good?
Professor, so the both parts that you had for the homework is for project 1, right?
Yes, that's all for just project 1. Because project 2 is you're working on those outlines, and so actually I'll be talking about that next week because, you know, oh, this is week 10. And I said week 11. I got to sit on that a little bit because basically with project 2 is just, you know, building out, you know, you're working to create a rough outline, you know, first draft of that paper based off of the outline that I posted up. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And there's a week between 14 and 15. I have to check my schedule. I have to see what my notes were as to, because I know I shifted the first draft. And I may
It says week 13.
Oh, it says week 13?
Yeah.
Oh, that's probably, oh, that's too close. It's got to be week 12. Because the papers due week 14. Draft. I have to just check my notes a bit because I need to make an adjustment because of my scheduling this past week. So it may be just due, the first draft may be due week 12. So with the second project, you're just working out on the template to start, once we go through and see those templates, to start building out the actual research paper. I hope that explained that.
Yeah, I think so. Got it. Professor, somebody else also mentioned, and I wanted to say that too, that week 9, there is nothing on Open Lab, like the class reps.
I know. I realized that yesterday. I was like, oh my God. So that's, again, I'm going to do a lot of catch up this weekend because of just my moving and this state of influx here. So I've fallen down on that. So that will be posted up by the weekend, depending on, because I'm completely off the computer on Thursday. That's my move day. So I'm completely out there and I won't have internet backup. Internet will be set up at my new place early Friday morning. So I figured by 12 noon, I should be back up. And depending on tomorrow, I might be online, I might not. I'm thinking I probably won't because I have to do a lot of running around before the move. So that's why I think I will be doing that over the weekend, you know, and try and get that done by Friday night so that everyone can actually refer to it for Saturday. Because I'll make it live that Friday, but I don't anticipate anybody looking at it till like the weekend.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I hope everyone has a good weekend. And, you know, like I said, I will be getting to all this stuff this weekend. I really do apologize for those delays. I hate the fact that this whole schedule of mine has just blown up in my face. But we'll definitely be back on track after Friday. And so, yeah, just hope everyone enjoys the weekend. Hopefully it's a good weekend. And I will see everybody next week.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Thank you again.
You're welcome. Have a good weekend.
You too.